If you're still struggling to make progress at picking up European Portuguese, it's probably not you that's the problem. It's the way you've been trying to learn. So today I want to tell you what I wish someone had told me sooner. If your plan is apps, grammar rules, and memorizing vocabulary first, you're training yourself to understand Portuguese on paper, but not to speak it in real life. Now, I learned Portuguese the old-fashioned way myself, university lectures, big textbook, the full academic experience. But when I actually moved to Portugal and I was speaking to my housemates, I realized how much of that was completely unnecessary. That was over 15 years ago, and since then I've spent the last 6 years teaching thousands of English speakers how to learn Portuguese the right way. And if I had to wipe everything clean and start European Portuguese from absolute zero, I would focus on these 3 things. I'm going to show you exactly what I would do and what I would avoid, because the traditional approach that most people take is actually the reason that they stay stuck. Okay, so mistake number 1 is over-relying on apps. Now, this is the first thing that most people do when they decide to learn any language. They grab their phone, they go to the app store and download an app like Duolingo or Babbel. And I get it, you open the app and you start a lesson and you get a little streak going and it feels like you're being productive, especially with all of the points and the progress bars. But in reality, you're just memorizing random vocabulary without any context. And these are often words that you're not even going to use in a real conversation. And there's a bigger problem for anyone planning to live in Portugal or who is already here. The Portuguese on a lot of the apps, particularly Duolingo, is Brazilian. Now, it is the same language on paper, but when you show up in Lisbon or Porto or the Algarve and someone speaks to you, it's going to sound nothing like what you have practiced. And that can be really confusing and really demoralizing. But even if you found an app that does teach European Portuguese, there is still a fundamental gap, because apps don't teach you how to shape your mouth or master that nasal sound that the locals actually use. And without that, you could know 1,000 words and people will still stare at you blankly because they can't understand your pronunciation. So if I was starting over, the very first thing I would do would be to throw away the apps and focus on how Portuguese actually sounds. Just last week, I did an interview with my students Chris and Lowell, and they were telling me what a game changer this approach was for them when they started learning Portuguese and how far they have got in just 46 days in Portugal because of this really top tip and this way that I teach my own students, starting with the sounds first.
The pronunciation made such a huge difference when you just kind of broke down, okay, this, when you see an E and an I together, this is what that sounds like. Unlocked so much, just made us so much more confident to try and speak.
So you really need to be training your ear and your mouth before trying to fill your head with vocabulary. And I'm going to break down exactly how I do that in a minute when we get to the roadmap. But before that, there's a second mistake that honestly sets people back even further. Before we get into it, if you would like to start getting your pronunciation right from day one, then I do have a free 60-minute lesson for beginners called Speak Portuguese Like a Pro. It covers the sounds that you're going to need to master, real life Portuguese, and essential grammar. Just click on the link in the description to sign up. So on to mistake number 2, and that is learning grammar before speaking. And this is the one that even I held on to the longest. I would always say to myself, I'm going to start speaking once I know enough grammar, once I can conjugate, once I stop making so many mistakes. And I spent months in this cycle, studying verb tables, writing out the conjugations, telling myself I just kept needing a little bit more. But the more I studied, the less confident I felt. And every time I learned something new, it made me realize how much I didn't even know yet. It was like the finish line kept moving. And I see this with so many of my students. They could pass a written test so easily, but ask them to go to the front of the queue and order something, then they might freeze. Because talking to locals is a completely different skill. So here's what I would do instead. I would start using Portuguese every single day in practical situations, even if it's only a few words. And this is exactly what I tell my students to do, and that is how they gain so much confidence so quickly. It could be saying bon dia to your neighbor, it could be ordering coffee, it could be asking for the bill. You don't need to have long conversations yet, you just need to start putting the language into your daily life from day one. And the more days you show up and practice the better you will get. So if apps and grammar alone aren't enough, can you just piece it together yourself with free resources? Now, I do post free content every single week on this channel. I have lots of free resources for beginners, so you can check those out in the description. But I do need to be honest, free resources are a brilliant starting point. But going from zero to having smooth conversations by stitching them all together is like trying to build a house using random YouTube tutorials. You just wouldn't do that. At some point, something's going to fall apart and there's no one to tell you how to fix it. No one's correcting your pronunciation in real time. No one's giving you feedback. And I see this all the time. People watch dozens of videos and download PDFs, and a few months later, they still can't talk to a local for 2 minutes. And they think the problem is them and they're just not good at languages, when really it was never about their ability. It was the lack of a clear path, real feedback, and people doing it alongside them. So if I was starting over, I would use free content to build early momentum, but the minute I was serious, I would find something structured with a roadmap, accountability, and a community. So now you know what you should stop doing. Here's what you should be doing instead. Number one, as I mentioned before, is train your ear and your mouth. So before I started learning a single word, I would spend my first few weeks getting comfortable with how European Portuguese sounds. Forget the meaning and the grammar for a minute, just focus on the sounds. Now, European Portuguese is fast. It compresses and drops syllables so quickly that a word with 4 syllables on paper might only sound like 2 when spoken. For example, está bem, obrigada. That's how it would sound if I stressed every syllable, but it's probably going to sound like this. Tá bem, obrigado. Plus, there are sounds that simply don't exist in English, like the real nasal vowels that Portuguese is famous for. So, for example, the word yes is sim. Seen, a really nasal I. The M is silent, but it's telling us to nasalize the vowel that goes before it. Now, there is a finite list of sounds used in Portuguese, and once you have mastered them, you'll be able to pronounce pretty much anything correctly. So in terms of practice, I would listen to native audio every single day. Things like short YouTube videos with subtitles, or beginner level podcasts, or even just listening in your local cafe to hear how the local barista or the neighbor speak. I actually made a video on exactly how to practice your listening at every level. I will link that in the description for you to check out next. The key is to repeat small phrases out loud and focus entirely on mimicking those specific sounds. And if you want to start practicing sounds right now, I do have a free pronunciation guide that covers 7 of the most difficult sounds in Portuguese with native speaker audio. It is the perfect place to start. Just visit the link in the description to download it. So step number 2 would be learning phrases for your real life. I would focus on the phrases I'm actually going to use every single day. Buying bread at the padaria, greeting my neighbors, asking for the bill. This is going to be so much more helpful than what a lot of classes would have you do, learning colors, animals, countries. You're just not going to be using that on a day-to-day basis. Let's take something as simple as asking where the bathroom is. I would learn these as complete sentences, complete blocks. Instead of trying to piece together where and is and bathroom, just learn onde fica a casa de banho as one thing. Then it can come out naturally whenever you need it, rather than you having to do mental gymnastics. And once you stack these phrases up, you'll be able to handle everyday interactions within weeks without even thinking about grammar. My 30-day practical Portuguese challenge would also be a great free resource to go to start stacking up some of these phrases. Step number 3 is to keep grammar light. Now, it definitely matters, but you need way less of it than you think you do. Just get a hang of the present tense. Some simple questions and basic needs will cover most of your daily interaction. My trick is to learn grammar through the phrases that you are learning. So, for example, when you say queria café, which means I would like a coffee, there is so much that I can teach my students about grammar from this one helpful sentence. For example, we use the imperfect tense for polite requests. We also have to know if a noun is masculine or feminine, because the article that's going to go before it is going to be gendered. So I need to know that café is masculine, so that I'm going to use for the definite article, the masculine version. Now, you don't need to know any of these technical terms to use this phrase, and when you eventually sit down to study those grammar points, it's going to click because you've already been using it for weeks. So this way you will learn grammar so much faster and way easier than just trying to remember grammar rules. If you do these 3 things consistently, you will be further ahead in 3 months than most people get out of a year of apps and textbooks. And I've watched it happen with hundreds of students inside my Portuguese Pro program. Now, I actually have a name for this approach and a full system built around it that I use with every single student that I work with, but I'm going to break that down in a future video, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss that one. But if you don't want to wait and you do want to take your first step learning Portuguese with me right now, then please visit my free 60-minute lesson for beginners, Speak Portuguese Like a Pro. The link to register is in the description. I'll be back next week with more tips and tutorials to improve your confidence and conversation skills in Portuguese, so I will look forward to seeing you very soon. Ciao for now.